Part one, we're going to start off with the book. This book that's coming out. So Shane and Denis, get ready. We're going to talk about your journey into this space. So this book, Shane and Denis came to me a few months ago and said they're writing this book. And the world, we're full of books right now. The question is, what book makes sense for today's world? And boy, do they have a book that actually makes perfect sense. The thing about the book, it's called Real Results in the Virtual Economy. And as I got into this book, and there were, I was lucky enough to get a copy of their book to kind of glance through it. And it really, really does make the case to any business customer, any management, as to why a digital first mindset and business is absolutely the only way forward. And talk about a timely release of anything during this pandemic, and that takes off that checkbox there. So we're going to dig into that to find out how they got into this book, why they got into this book, and how this could make a difference for both MSPs and vendors. I was able to, with some interviews with them, they were kind enough to add a few extra chapters towards the end where they actually explained how cybersecurity is an interesting component of any digital transformation. And the last part that really is exciting is that it ties it right back to the MSP community. So now that you figured out that you want to do digital transformation and being a digital first company, how do you go get the people, the partners, to help you get that done? So that's the general intro. I'd like to welcome Dr. Denis Cauvier and Shane Gibson. So if you're both there, just jump ahead and say hello.
Hello, hey, thanks a lot for having us.
All right. So welcome, guys. I mean, this book is really awesome. As I said, I read very, very interesting books, and one of the things I'm always looking for is, can this do something, right, to move the needle up on the channel? And so I'm really excited to kind of explore this book with you. So before we get in, Denis, since you're on the screen, can you tell a bit to everyone about, how you got started in this game and what's your background in this world?
Sure. So I used to be a senior banker with the Royal Bank of Canada. More than 3 decades ago, decided to hang my shingle out as a consultant and a professional speaker. And very fortunate for me, because I was very young in the industry, I met this great guy, Bill Gibson, who happens actually to be Shane's father. And Bill took me under his wing, and it was life-changing. The power of mentorship and concerted guidance. Bill, phenomenal human being, very creative business development, one of the world's leading authorities in professional selling, customer service, business development, just a great guy. And through that, 31 years ago, working very closely with Bill, I got to meet the entire family. And Shane was a teenager at that time. And Shane, super interesting individual, loves martial arts, loves the outdoors. And so he and I, we just hit it off instantly and became buddies. And we've done numerous projects together. And when we started exploring the idea of this book, and the concept came to me a number of months ago, and I thought there's no one in the entire planet, any other speaker or colleague that I would rather co-write this book with than my good buddy Shane.
Dennis, thanks a lot. I don't know how to follow that up with an intro, but yeah, it was interesting because that's, my father mentored Dennis and then myself, which I started speaking, of course, over 20 years ago. And Dennis and I, were friends first and then worked on a number of projects with financial institutions, organizations like CPA Canada. And that's the Canadian, obviously the accounting designation, not our channel partner alliance. And have had, opportunities to kind of co-mentor each other in different areas. And, my background being, of course, in professional sales, but also writing 2 books on digital sales and social selling and social media marketing, at the dawn of civilization for social media marketing, which was back in 2009, 2010. And it was interesting for me is that, being a pure sales trainer, sales speaker, author, being in the trenches, teaching traditional sales skills for many years, and then jumping into the social media space when Steve Jagger and I first wrote the book on Sociable, which was one of the first books written for sales professionals and entrepreneurs on social media. We were just trying to convince people that Twitter and Facebook were relevant at all. And, so that's where we started. And so we've been beating this drum and doing live video streaming, no one was watching on the internet a decade ago. It's amazing all of a sudden to get to the point where 6 months ago, it was a nice to have to do these things. And today it's now the primary channel for most businesses. And so puts us in an interesting point. So when the pandemic struck and I'm sitting at, home, and I thought, well, it looks like I'm going to have a 4-month holiday. That was my thought, because everybody's canceled every event, time to go hiking, and then something interesting happened is every A-type CEO and VP of sales started calling me saying, what do we do? How do we transition our force online? How do we get these guys that are used to sticky notes and notepads and driving the miles to actually go digital? And at that same time, Denis reached out and said, Shane, this is the next book we're going to do together. And we're going to help people get real results in this virtual economy. And so that's kind of how we got here. And it's been an exciting, very compressed process to start in early August. And today, the book is presently being laid up and getting ready to be printed in the next couple of weeks. So it will be in our hands mid-November. So that's how we got into this position. Yeah.
Very good. So, it's a time, obviously a timely book. So let's dig into this book a little bit. So a book is a book is a book, obviously, but why would this book matter to the channel partners and to the vendors who build SaaS or any kind of digital solution in market space? Let me, as I was reading the book, you talked about the 5 stages of digital reinvention, right?
Yeah.
So what does that really mean?
Let me, I can pull that slide. I got a slide here. I'm going to pull it up and maybe we'll walk you through it. Theoretically. So let's talk about those 5 stages actually. And maybe Denis and I both can speak to this. Maybe Denis, do you want to hop in and kind of start us, or I'll start and we'll kind of move through. We'll ad lib here. So feel free to cut me off. We were trying to figure out who talks first. That's so hard for 2 speakers to decide. So just interrupt me. So we looked at these 5 stages and we like to call it digital reinvention versus transformation. I think this is important is because sometimes it necessitates that it's not about transforming an existing process to the internet. I get this all the time with sales organizations. Let's take our old sales process, let's cut and paste it on the internet and follow the same steps. And it doesn't work that way. And so we have to look at is how do I have to reinvent my business model, look at new markets, look at new offerings to move into this digital first marketplace. So this is really what we look at as a process. And our goal is to get as many organizations as possible to the proactive or reinvention leader stage. And first, we start off with resistant, and the resistant is just that. It's an organization that you go into, and I won't name the automotive manufacturer, but literally less than 5 years ago, doing a national program with them in Canada, and they explained to me that some of the dealers still required a fax update on upcoming events. Swear to God. And that's a good example of a resistant organization that has, or don't bother Bob with a new CRM. He's doing really good with the old one hosted on our network that was built, a decade ago, that has no backups. And he uses sticky notes as well around his computer screen. And we can't get Bob to transition to a platform that's mobile and AI enabled because that will interrupt his sales process. And so this is kind of the process where people are resistant. And then we get into this next stage, which is reactive. And this is where the external forces act upon our business, where our competitors are shifting, the market's changing technologically, they're advancing, and we're forced to make these changes and react to them. And to some degree, a lot of businesses have moved into their digital reinvention phase because of COVID in a reactive manner, right? These restaurant owners did not have delivery platforms they were on. A lot of businesses weren't using Zoom meetings, and they were reactively and begrudgingly are behind and caught on their heels. And then we got responsive. And these people are the ones that actually see the trends and have a process and an infrastructure in place to adapt as the market moves. Then we've got proactive. And these are people that are just going, hey, what's going to happen? Let's talk to the bleeding edge technology providers and look at the leaders in our industry who are reinventing and see what they're doing or what's happening in other industries. And then lastly, you've got your reinvention leaders. And these people who are literally organizations that are inventing new industries, completely disrupting. These are the ones that are creating the change externally. So, of course, we can think of tried and true reinvention leaders like an Airbnb, like an Uber, right? And to some degree, initially, Facebook and even LinkedIn were reinvention leaders where they actually changed the way people network, connect, and communicate. And it didn't exist before. And so, I even look at from a reinvention leader. Last session, Jay McBain talked about, a Caterpillar type manufacturer, right? Was basically, dealing with pallet. What do we call this? I'm trying to remember the. Help me out here, Dennis.
Pallets?
Not pallets, but any type of machinery, right? So they're heavy machinery companies, right? And so they moved from being machinery companies to actually being an Internet of Things platform company that just happens to be putting all these tools into machinery, and they're completely providing machinery as a service instead of selling machinery or leasing. And so these are examples of reinvention leaders. And so from this perspective, our goal in the book is to help organizations develop the leadership and sales infrastructure and culture that actually drives this. Because, and maybe Dennis, I'll pass it over to you and I'll kind of stop the screen share.
I think that's great, Shane. In fact, as you've articulated very well, these are our 5 stages of this digital reinvention. And it's really about reinventing yourself from the inside out. And, invariably what happens is you go through this process, a couple of things are going to be changing. You're going to be looking at reinventing key structures, internal processes, looking to platforms as support for this. But one of the things we got to be very mindful of is we have to be very clear to understand the glue that holds the whole thing together. And the glue that holds any digital first transformation or reinvention together, it's a mindset. And it really is understanding it's not selling technology for the sake of technology. It's really about, and Shane and I talked a lot about this in the early parts of the book. And in fact, actually throughout the book, we talk about let us go and take the leads from your customers. And no surprise, COVID happened. The world basically shut down virtually. Everyone had to go and work home remotely. And then people got used to this. People did their shopping online. I mean, look, 81% of all purchases, not just the exploring with brands, not just the research, but one of these things right here on a mobile, 81% of all purchases, whether it's B2B, B2C, doesn't matter, is happening mobile first. So if this is where your customers are, if this is where the world is going, we have to understand that digital first is first and foremost a client-centric ideology. So we have to wrap our head around this, and we have to actually embrace what it truly is. And it all starts with the right mindset. And you can only transform corporate culture, which is an area I've worked for 3 decades in, if you get everyone aligned. So you got to look at some of the key things. You got to look at your mission, your vision, your core values, and your foundational objectives. They have to be all in line with each other, and digital has to be aligned with that. It's not something you do on the side. Fundamentally, it's about digital is how we do it. It's not what we do, it's how we do it, it being meeting the customer where they want us. And Shane often says, when this is over, are we going to send the clients out on the road? No, people don't want to see your sales reps. They want to meet virtually. So this is a practical thing. And I think it's very, very important that anybody who's watching this today, whether you're a vendor, MSP, it's about how do you express real take-home value. It's about articulating the business case. And maybe Shane, if we've got the next slide, I think it might be the profit model, I believe.
You betcha. Let me share that.
I want to ask a question there.
Sure.
So I know you also in the book you talked about a digital first enterprise readiness assessment, which I gravitated to that like almost instantly in the book and started to fill it in. Could you just give us a bit of an overview? Because in this book, there's actually an assessment thing that as a company, you can fill in the blanks and it'll give you a kind of a benchmark. Can you give us a little bit of info on that first?
Yeah, I guess instead of going through the dozens of different points,
No,
and
not
that's a
all.
great question, I think maybe if we take a step back and really talk about the essence of the book, because within that assessment tool are these foundational pieces. Number one is understanding what digital first really is and is not. And then of course, within the assessment, we articulate that so you can measure that. Secondly, we're really looking at some of the business models, collaborative systems, mechanisms to do this. You know, in a virtual world with remote workers, do you have the right processes and skill sets and competencies to recruit the best talent, to pre-screen, to interview, select, and then once you hire them, to onboard them, to engage them, etc., to lead, provide just-in-time feedback. That's just on the personnel side. And then what I'll do is I'll transition to Shane, maybe to speak a little bit on the digital selling and digital warrior and business development side.
Yeah, so I think that, you know, this is the big piece that we look at is everyone's talking about AI, which is very important. And I think about, I pulled out some AI-based stats here just this morning and found that, you know, we've actually, gone from 10% of businesses implementing AI in their sales and customer engagement process to now 37%, according to Capgemini, of businesses in 2019 implementing over a 5-year period growth. So that, you know, works out to a 270% growth in 4 years of the implementation of AI in sales and service centric processes in a business. So the thought process is, well, then the advantage is I need to use artificial intelligence to drive my sales organization. But here we go. If I'm using artificial intelligence and my competitors are using it, that's no longer an advantage. That's actually just the ticket to the sales conference. That's what gets you in the door. Then the differentiator actually becomes what I like to call right brain sales skills. So these are things that AI can't do. These are elevated human skills like rapport building, prospecting, engagement, presentation, negotiations, cracking a joke with a client, networking. All of these things are actually becoming more important, not less, because once we're all equal with and armed with these sort of Iron Man suits, so to speak, as salespeople, and we're enabled robotically, now it's who's operating that makes the difference creatively, and the ability to pivot and adapt as the environment changes. So a big part of the book also talks about what is the competencies of this, yes, tech savvy, but right brain sales skilled sales professional of today. And then how do I lead these people? Because they're an unruly bunch when you get creative, open-minded salespeople. And so what are some of the leadership skills that you need to lead them as well? So these are some of the things that kind of really dovetail between, you know, the first part of the book, which really is the leadership and HR and systems aspect, and then the sales and brand aspect. And so that's kind of what we get into. And I think it's really interesting to see us go full circle, where I've got organizations like, I've got one of Canada's leading digital agencies with a couple hundred staff and a couple dozen sales staff come out to me and say, "Hey, Shane, we need sales training." And I thought, okay, are we going to do Zoom? Or are we going to do LinkedIn? We're like, no, we got that. Can you teach our people how to gain rapport and listen and connect with senior decision makers? And can we talk about social intelligence and emotional intelligence? Because our staff get all the technical side, but we need help in this. This is what's going to differentiate ourselves from the other agencies. So it's kind of a contrarian outlook as well on digital and remote selling, because we're thinking that I need to teach my people how to use Zoom better, which we do, but we also need to give them the people skills and how to translate those in a digital environment.
Yeah, you know, and that's so important. Just to echo one thought that Shane just said, you know, in classic or traditional sales training, one of the acronyms that is also often used was A&D, and I'm sure a lot of people have heard of this. So the classical training went like this. Let's first of all find out if your prospect or your suspect has A. A stands for the ability to pay for your product or service. Next thing you want to do is you want to qualify them. Do they actually have N, the need? So A, N, and then D. So they have the ability to pay. They have the need. The last part, and this is, as Shane was talking about, this rapport building, that's where face-to-face, you go over coffee or whatever, you meet them in real time, and you work on the D, the desire to do business with you. And that's about rapport building, relationship building. You see, now things have totally flipped around. What we're seeing with social selling, we're calling this the DNA of social selling. You have to start with the desire first. Quite frankly, with AI and so many other mechanisms, you can find out, you can pre-qualify them automatically with a number of platforms. Do they have the ability and the need for your product or services? That's the easy part. You know, the robots can take care of that easily, but as Shane was saying so correctly, it's the human element. And that's where we really have to upskill people on how can we accelerate the desire for two people to connect, engage, and do business together. And, you know, and it's not, it doesn't matter who's watching this. This has to happen within your own teams. It's not just about the desire to sell your products and services on your platforms to either to an MSP if you're a vendor, or MSPs down to your ultimate users. It's also about selling a corporate change, a new way of doing things. It's about, first of all, having that human-to-human connection, the desire to trust each other and to engage. And I think that's something that in our book, we've really dealt with it, I feel, very effectively. Is although it is a book about technologies, it's first and foremost, it's a business book. It's a book of growth. It's a book of professional and positive relationships. And I think that's always going to be the cornerstone of successful business moving forward.
So, you know, one of the things I also read in your book, you had a really cool example. You know, restaurants, hospitality has been hit really hard. And you outlined an example from a company in New Orleans, I believe it is, that pivoted. Could you just give us a brief overview of how an industry, you know, expert was in the fringe of dying and then came back alive?
Yeah, QE Resources out of Louisiana, New Orleans. So this is a group of 8 different bars and restaurants. Very successful company. They double and triple down in staff training, customer service training, particularly for the waiters and the bar staff. And the reason for this is because they know that is the point of contact with the paying customer. Now, some of the benefits over the years of them doing this is they've got, you know, huge sales, great reputation, tons of awards and recognition, and one of the lowest levels of staff turnover in an area that's notoriously high. Pandemic hits, all of a sudden, 175 bar staff and wait staff cannot be inside the buildings anymore. Yes, they can do takeout and pick up, but there's no way you could do in dining. So the owners are thinking about this and saying, well, first of all, the pandemic, they hope wasn't going to last forever. They didn't want to lose all that investment in this talent. They said, how do we keep connected with these people? How can we find some sort of income for them? So they got creative. And what they did is they heard about the telehealth services that were happening in the state of Louisiana. Now, because of COVID and the fear that COVID was going to overwhelm the medical system, they came up with telehealth. It's been happening in many parts of the world, but they needed to actually hire a bunch of people to work in a call center. And these people had to have excellent listening and communication skills. And so what these 2 entrepreneurs did is they created another company called QE Resources. And so what they did is they offered their staff, they said, look, we will, if you want, we will train you, we'll provide you with the equipment so you can work from home and you can be like a concierge service. And you can talk to seniors and other people that are very uncomfortable with the idea of telehealth, get them comfortable, walk them through the technology. Long and short of it is that virtually all the 175 people took it. They were gainfully employed. Within 5 business days, they were up and running. You know, so what happened is these people retained employment. They were very loyal back to their employer. In fact, 93% said, when COVID allows and they can go back and reopen the restaurants, they want to continue working. So it's a great retention strategy. But Julian, the beautiful part is they also created another line of income that was actually more profitable than the restaurant business. And again, it was a digital play. And how they did this is they would have good, in the morning, just before people started, through Zoom, they'd have some sort of a quick check-in, tell some jokes, energizers, best practices. So they use the kind of ideology, but they use the visual collaboration tools. And I tell you, they're growing like crazy, this organization.
Awesome stuff. It's always great to have some examples to kind of show how when you pivot, right, what could really happen. And maybe quickly, there was one more example you had in there from a company in Australia who, of all things, were doing stage for people like singers and stuff like this. And of course, no more concerts, right? So what did they do?
Yeah, I'll quickly share that one as well. They're called Stage Kings, based out of Sydney, Australia, 10 years in business, 12 very loyal, talented people. They were known as the go-to place to create unique stages for big events, concerts like the Miley Cyrus concert, the Melbourne Music Festival, etc. So COVID hits, overnight, they lose 1 year of business. Done. Well, they're kind of freaking out, wondering, what are they going to do? They said, wait a minute, we're talented people who got project managers, welders, carpenters, designers. They said, there's a massive movement that happened overnight, and people have to work at home in Australia like the rest of the world. They said, especially in the city of Sydney, there's not a lot of people don't have big homes. They're going to need a little workspace. So they came up with something. They were called the Stage Kings was the name of the company. They came up with a concept called ISO as isolation kings. They came up with a concept of a desk. They had a small social media following. They sent out the concept of the desk and the purported price, and they said, give us some feedback. People said, reasonable price, could you change this, can you change that? They made the changes, then they sold it. It sold out, did very, very well. And of course, people start talking about it, giving it online reviews, etc. They start getting free local advertising. They get covered with the local media. Why? The media is so used to covering this bad news, they just want to hear some good news. And then what happens is they really start becoming very popular. They double down, triple down on digital. They create the e-platform. Then they ask their ever-growing community, give us your ideas of what you'd like us to design for you. So what they've done, idea would come in, they tweak it, they'd send it to the community would give it some ideas, they finally get it to the right iteration, then they actually test the market. Every product goes through a GoFundMe campaign. It actually proves itself financially viable with built-in sales. To date, they have launched over 41 highly successful, unique, different products, 100% digital. And this is a tiny company. And this is a company that were not digital before, no big resources, and they did it. So, what we're saying is, and within the book, is that we spell out, stage by stage by stage, how to do it, how to take any organization through this digital reinvention and make sure it sticks.
Brilliant. Love those stories. Another thing you guys talked about in the book is about, the new way of selling. I mean, at the end of the day, if you don't sell something, right, you don't have a business, right? And selling today is a little bit different. We're going from road warriors, right, to digital, virtual warriors, right? So maybe either you or Shane can talk about some of the key things that you guys covered in the book that shows people how the new way of doing sales is going to be mandatory. And reality is that either your sales team need to pivot or you're going to have to find, the right fit salespeople moving forward, right? So what do you guys have to say about that?
I think we start with kind of redefining what a brand means to a lot of organizations. A brand to a lot of organizations is a clean, controlled logo and some well thought out comments that we push out into the marketplace. And a brand today in the digital space is all about the networked community that surrounds it. And what people say about your brand is way more powerful than what your brand is. I mean, my longtime mentor and friend of mine, J. Conrad Levinson, would say that your brand is what the customer says it is. It's not what you say it is. It's what they say it is. And so there is a real, from this perspective, if we're now digital first, it means we need to build a community around our brand digitally. And marketing and sales today is now conversational. And that conversation starts on digital platforms. It starts on voice of customer. And it's about harnessing the voice of customer, not controlling it or yelling over them. And it's actually finding ways to engage. And that example Dennis just gave is an incredible example of building a community around our brand, harnessing and partnering with customers on digital platforms. And so for me, this drills down to thought leadership, and it's in tandem. It's not about the brand having thought leadership, because the brand is a collective. It's actually about empowering as many individuals within our organization, which are customer facing, to actually become brand ambassadors, the people that work for us, and thought leaders in their own right as sales professionals. And so the thought leadership, for those of you who see me speak before in a different channel next events, this model won't be new to you, but it really comes down to three things. It's creating and curating relevant content that highlights your expertise. It's then about having great conversations with our community, and it's about building community, which is continually growing our network, but also giving back to it in a way that's bigger than our brand. And this is a really, important sort of trifecta. If we can do these three things, it's really vital. And so infusing this social DNA into our sales organizations and realizing that branding is now about attraction, but attraction doesn't just happen by pushing out great content. It's content, community, conversations that are very focused. And then, of course, we can leverage tools like LinkedIn Sales Navigator and other platforms to directly prospect. But our social credit rating, our sales credit rating, is really now our social footprint. And so once I prospect and reach out to you and say, hey, Randall, let's talk about doing business together, first thing he's going to do is Google my organization and look at my LinkedIn profile. And whatever shows up from my conversations and content plus my community is going to help Randall decide whether this guy has a high enough sales and marketing credit rating on the internet to do business with me, to even say hello. And so this is a really different shift, and it's about empowering a networked concept of sales and brand building instead of top down and the marketing department owns this and the sales department is doing this and we all stay in our lane. That doesn't exist anymore, in my opinion. So I don't know. That's a long rant. I apologize. I don't know if there's anything you want to add in there, Dennis.
Just that short little stat from Hootsuite, a recent study, and just before sharing this, it just it goes along with what Shane is saying, that brand management, it's not a job title or a job description, and I 100% agree with what Shane's saying. It's really everybody within the organization has to take their hand to it. Here's the stat: 75% of consumers say that a CEO's presence on social media makes a brand much more trustworthy. And it's not just to be top down, but also on the flip side, it's not something that the C-suite needs to be delegating off to say, that's your department, you go deal with it. And so I just want to reiterate Shane's comments. It is really everybody. In a lean and agile organization, everyone has to be an active recruiter when you're looking for good people. Everyone has to be an active brand ambassador. These are foundational moving forward.
So can I add one piece in there just before you hop in? And this, before I lose my train of thought, being somewhat an easily distracted entrepreneur, is this stat here, and this is about e-commerce, because we're telling everybody, hey, you need to now enable your business with some form of e-commerce, whether it's online payments, order taking, engagement with our customers. But here's something interesting. Market Signals, recent study, less than a year old, found that the failure rate for e-commerce startups or divisions is at 90% after 120 days. So the biggest contributing factor, poor online marketing performance, coupled with an overall lack of search engine visibility. So when we look at, hey, I'm going to go digital and go e-commerce, well, guess what? It means you need a real solid digital marketing and visibility strategy in place in order to succeed. So the reality of this new environment is we can't dabble in the digital. We've got to really, really double down. I don't know how I had so many D's in there, but there we go. Good
to add D's. Hey, So, one thing I wanted to make a point as well, and I think we all would agree to this, is that doing digital and social media, you better be doing it right? You just can't be just getting like a LinkedIn Sales Navigator or something like that and just inviting people to join your network. And then the next message comes back as, hey, can we set up an appointment and meet and talk, right? You really gotta build that trust and credibility because people won't even go to your LinkedIn profile. They'll just delete you, right? If you come back with that type of an approach. We're all kind of tired of it. So you want to basically start by sharing valuable content, right? Giving something to the community, doing something that's important, right? Becoming a thought leader. So what's your take on, if you had to give someone a 1-minute pitch, right? On if you were going to get into the social game and become, whatever you were doing in the past, you're now going to be doing social a little bit. What should you be doing first?
Well, let me comment on this, and I know Shane will have lots to offer, but I'm going to actually use an old Scottish term as an acronym, a BRAE, B-R-A-E, BRAE. BRAE means it's an uphill slope, okay? And for a lot of people, if you're just starting in the journey of social media, it feels like an overwhelming slope that you've got to conquer. So looking at the acronym, B stands for, it's about your brand development. You've got to be mindful of everything you do that's in alignment with your true and authentic brand self. R, it's about relationships. You want to develop meaningful relationships. You want to build on that desire. And then it's so important. The last two things, A is, if you're investing all this time and energy, you want to attract the right target market, or as we call, your nano tribe. You want to really hone in as opposed to try to be, everything to everybody. You want to be targeted. And lastly, E, you want to engage, and I'm going to use your word that you just used, Julian. You want to engage with value. You want to bring value to the conversation. And I know Shane could probably fill up 10 hours on this topic. So Shane, thoughts?
Yeah, I think I don't want to talk much more now because I think you kind of hit it well at a high level. I would say that, when we talk about the rules of engagement around social selling, the big ratio, which people got wrong when Steve Jagger and I first wrote the book Sociable in 2009, and they continue to get wrong today, which is really unfortunate. It means we didn't sell enough books or something. I'm not sure. But the reality is that good social selling is about 90%, maybe 80% value-added content, great curation. When we're sharing content, it's about things that help people either reach a goal or solve a pain. It's sharing community content. It's having good conversations. And 10, maybe 20% of it is me marketing. Look at me. Here's what we're doing. Here's our press release. Here's our product. But it can only be me marketing, though, if it's interesting, if it's engaging, if it's unique angle on that. Other than that, you're just noise. And there's so much noise out there that me marketing just gets buried right away. People don't even hear it. They don't even have to ignore you. They just don't see you. And so I think this is a really important part. And I always use like the acronym of, okay, back in the day, those of us who are old enough to remember commercials on television, because we no longer have those, right? But back in the day, when you actually had to watch commercials, if you wanted to watch TV, none of us would watch a TV show for an hour if we had to watch 45 minutes of ads to get 15 minutes of content. But people are doing it on social media. And that's why we're turning people off, is because it's the essence, me marketing. Oh, here's a little thing about you. And it has to flip. We have to think about how to add value through content, conversations, connections, and then contextually, the other C is in context, share that value-added content that resonates with your specific nano tribe. And this is something that has to change. It's not to spray and pray, let's cold call 100 people to reach 2 who want to buy our stuff, but alienate 98. It's how do I build a warm market? Right? How do I really understand who to talk to now and then enter with context? And context is such an important part of all things digital and communications.
So we've got about 10 minutes left to kind of wrap this up a little bit. And if there's any questions, maybe you can just shout it out as we get them. But hey, so I want to bring this down to this book. Okay, obviously, if you read the book cover to cover, it's going to give you a very good insight into why digital first matters, how to go about it, how to think about it, how to get into the right mindset, and so on. So without a doubt, it makes the case, right? So now we've got this book in hand, right? And I want to bring it back to my community, which is how do we help these channel partners, right? And vendors to leverage this book. So maybe the first, nut we'll try to crack here is, as an MSP out there in the world we're living in right now, what are your thoughts in how they could leverage this book to go out there and grow their own business?
I'd start maybe with, first of all, read the book yourself and use the various diagnostic tools and discovery tools in there. They're very powerful, they're very non-threatening. And first of all, make sure your own house is in order, first of all. Make sure that from the digital selling, the brand building, the leading and working with getting the best possible impact with your virtual teammates. Make sure that all that is working well, because again, if you're in a stronger platform, you're just going to do better. And I mean platform, not from a software platform, but from a place of strength. Secondly, it's a phenomenal calling card that helps very clearly articulate the business case of why organizations should really be embracing a digital first mindset. It takes it through step by step, as we've articulated already, but also towards the end, we know it can be overwhelming, particularly for organizations that are very early in the journey. So where we talk about the strategies on how to find the right partner, the right, for example, MSP. Throughout the book, we do talk about various software platforms that are there to help in a variety of applications. So I think the book's intended audience is very senior decision makers. It's C-suite executives, the head of sales, the head of marketing, CEO, president, etc. These are the people that control the financial purse strings. These are the people that you have to, I believe, communicate to them that we're not looking at tech for the sake of tech because it's sexy and it's on trend, rather than this. What is my intended or expected return on investment? If you show me, I'm a CEO of 3 companies, you show me how if I invest $1 over a reasonable period of time and I follow the templates, I'm going to get $10 ROI, I'll go borrow the money if necessary, because I understand that it's an excellent return on investment. And that's ultimately what we're talking about, is what is the business case solution argument for your unique solution. Shane, you want to weigh in on this as well?
Well, yeah, I think it's, one of the conversations I've had with small and very large MSPs is their desire to get away from any type of break and fix or one product customer. They want to offer holistic end-to-end solutions, from collaboration tools to communications tools to the ERP to their CRM to their cybersecurity. And in order to get a customer to think like that, we have to move them into the business case and how they need to become a digital first organization. And we talk lightly about various platforms and tools available, but we intentionally made it agnostic as far as what software to use. It's about the culture and that you need to build and the processes in order to go digital first. And then it creates that argument. And then it's up to the MSP after that customer goes, I know I need to do this. And we have to put a bigger budget, and this is where we're going in the future. We need a partner to help us. And that's really what we have people ending with, is that thought that it's important. And I know I need the right people. I can't go it alone. And that was funny enough. We didn't start this book saying, hey, let's write a book that creates a need for MSPs and technology vendors. We just started writing the book, and then we sat down with Julian, and he was like, guys, this is basically the business case for our entire channel. You really got to talk to our channel. So it was an interesting kind of serendipitous evolution of where it's at.